Good morning and good afternoon. So good morning to West Coasters and good afternoon to East Coasters. Thanks for joining us today for this online briefing. So this is a briefing about submitting project concepts to Natural Hazards Research Australia. We have an open call for project concepts at the moment. So the purpose of this briefing is to provide some guidance and context for people who are looking at submitting a concept to the centre in this current round, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that process is and step through the process with you today. So my name is Blythe McLennan. I'm a research manager at Natural Hazards Research Australia, and I'm chairing today. I'll shortly introduce a couple of other people who are going to assist me with the briefing and particularly with answering your questions towards the end as well. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of all the lands that each of us are currently situated on right across Australia, and acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay respects to the people, the cultures and the elders, past and present, and recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, learning and research, and we acknowledge that sovereignty has not been ceded. So as I said, the purpose of this briefing is to primarily assist people who are developing project concepts to submit to Natural Hazards Research Australia over the next few weeks. So the briefing's in three parts. The first, I'm going to do more of a high-level overview about the project concept submission process, what it's for, why we do it, who can submit, how it works and how it fits together with how we bring the research program together at the centre. For those who've been involved in this process previously, that might be a little bit of a repeat for you, but hopefully it's still a useful overview of what we're here and how it works as well. And then second, I'll move more specifically into the process of submitting the process of submitting an idea or a concept to the centre, how we prioritise those concepts and how they are approved to be added into our portfolio. And so I'll go through some more details there about what we're looking for, key dates, making a submission, what our prioritisation process is, and key contacts and resources for you during that development process. And then finally, the third part, very importantly, is questions and answers. And I'm going to do my best to not talk too long and hopefully leave quite a good amount of time for questions and answers at the end. So we are recording, as you will have known. Just the presentation components and me speaking is going to be shared and put up on our website, not the Q&A component. We'll record both just in case there are questions in the Q&A that we might want to add to a list of frequently asked questions later on. And the slides will be shared with you as well. So we're holding this as a meeting style, not like a webinar style online briefing, so that you can ask verbal questions, but I'll ask you to hold verbal questions until the Q&A session. You're welcome to put questions into the chat at any time, and I'll keep an eye on that and I'll come back to questions. I will probably most likely hold off answering questions until the end of the presentation part, just because there's a lot of different things that we could discuss in and of themselves for an hour, and so just to avoid going off on tangents and to keep to time and make sure I cover everything that we want to cover to help people when putting those concepts together, I'll leave those questions towards the end. So just a reminder as well then, if you're not speaking, make sure your mic is on mute. You are welcome to put your camera on. It's lovely to see people's faces when you're presenting, but that is optional. Yeah, and I think that's all I need to let you know as far as some housekeeping. One more then perhaps to add is I will be keeping to the topic and the purpose of this session. So if you put questions in the chat and they're not specifically about that project concept submission process, we may not get to answering them. If you put questions in that we don't get to, I'd like to invite you to send them to your node research manager after the briefing, and between us we'll make sure that we get answers to all your questions, but today I'll be prioritising the questions that are about that concept submission process specifically. All right, so I said there are a couple of people going to be assisting me with the briefing today. So I might ask Sarah and Shiva to put their cameras on so you can see their faces. Shiva has his camera on, so I'll introduce you first. So Dr. Shiva Prasad is our Research and Implementation Director, And I can't see, but I'm sure Sarah's put her camera on. Yes, she has. And Sarah Mizzi is our Partnership Development Director. So they're here to help me answer, especially the tricky questions that you might pose to her. I'll do the simple ones. So I'll get into the project concept submission. Now, this is something that's quite different. It's not a familiar process. You won't see many funding bodies doing something like this. And so it's worth summarising what it is. So project concepts and our calls for submitting project concepts to Natural Hazards Research Australia is a way for us to ask participants in the centre what research they think we should be adding to our portfolio. So we formally consider concepts twice a year, and that's a part of our ongoing research plan. So this is the first call for the year, and then later around August, September, we'll have a second call for project concepts. I think it's important to clarify what it isn't as well. So this isn't a grant process or a research proposal process or a procurement process. So this is the centre asking the participants, and I'll explain what a participant is in a moment, to tell the centre what research they think we should have on our portfolio. So it's an earlier step than taking proposals for research projects. It's a step that comes before that, and I'll show you how they fit together in a moment. And something that's really important to know about this as well is the project concept submission process is targeted to users of research, not providers of research. Having said that, I understand that that's an oversimplification and that the distinction between users and providers of research is not that clear cut, and we are very well aware of that, and there's a lot of nuance around that. But in general, that sort of explains what the concept process is pitched to. So why do we do it? We do it because we have a really strong mandate from the Commonwealth Government to be end user driven. So that means right from the initiation of projects, so of what projects we should be doing, and then all the way through the research. It also enables us to be responsive to the sector's needs. So for those people who are familiar with the Cooperative Research Centre days, there was a research program that was set up, and then it ran for 3 years. And throughout that 3-year period, there was an opportunity for new research to come on apart from the contract and postgrad program. And there's some exceptions to that, but in general, the core research was set up and then ran out for a 3-year period. So in order to be more responsive to changing needs over time, we have this process where we ask for new project ideas twice a year in an ongoing way. So we don't have a set program that's kind of locked in for that 3-year period. So that was another driver of having this concept process. And if you've ever been to a Natural Hazards Research Australia event or function previously, you will have heard our mantra of undertaking research that is useful, usable, and used. So that really highlights that we also have a strong mandate to undertake research that is translatable and implementable and has stakeholder support and is wanted by the sector and that the sector wants to use. Just to underline that a little bit, I've just taken this snippet out of our most recent annual report. So this kind of underlines what we mean by end user driven research. So the centre engages with its participants to ensure the research program is driven by the needs of government, emergency services, industry, and the community. All projects have identified translation and implementation pathways that have been co-developed and agreed with relevant end users before the commencement of each project. So that is really articulating another reason that we have project concepts come in from sector partners or end users, to use the CRC language, is so that we can really identify that there is a need in the sector, not only, so when we ask for concepts, we're not only looking for people to tell us what research is needed, but also to tell us how they think they're going to put this into use, so that there's a clear understanding, we're going to do something with this research, we're going to use it and we're going to apply it somewhere in the sector. And that's actually really exciting for researchers, because when you're on a project that's funded by Natural Hazards Research Australia, you have a really high likelihood that your research is going to be really impactful and is going to be actively used by the sector. And so this having the concept submission process at the beginning is one way that we set that up right from the start. Connected to that then, we have some guidelines around who can submit. So as I said, the concept submission process is targeted to users of the research, not the providers of the research. So research concepts must be submitted by representatives of one of the centre's participants. And I've put a little definition in the green box there about what participant means. So a participant is an organisation or entity and its representatives that have been contracted through a participant agreement with the centre. I wanted to be clear that at this stage doesn't include research institutions. So at the moment, we don't accept project concepts from research organisations. We include them from sector partners that have signed up as a participant in the centre. And I'll show you in a moment a list of who they are. So for those people who are from participant organisations who are looking at putting a submission in, something that's very important for you in putting that concept together is the second point here. So we, in general, don't fund research that is only supported by one organisation. We're a national research centre. We need to be able to show that the research we're funding is of value sort of nationally and across a range of organisations and sectors and jurisdictions. So we encourage submitting participants to build collaborations with other organisations across multiple states and territories to help demonstrate why the concept they're putting to us is nationally significant. And your node research managers are able to assist with making those connections if you're not sure of who to reach out to. And I'll put contact details up at the end. That's a list of our current participants. I just wanted to throw to Sarah, is there anything else you wanted to say around participants and who submits concepts to the centre?
Thanks, Blythe. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be brief. So just to reiterate what Blythe said, this process is open to organisations that are formal participants of the centre, i.e. your organisation has signed a participant agreement with us. If your organisation is what we used to call an end user organisation, or you could also think of it as a sector representative that is not a participant of the centre, you can come and talk to me about another way that you can engage with us, and that's primarily through our commissioned research program. Another opportunity that you might want to avail yourself of is all those organisations that you see on screen can lead a concept that comes through to the centre. However, we do recognise that there is value in collaborations occurring with other organisations that are end users that are not participants. And so your organisation might want to be a supporting participant on a concept. And I know Blythe is going to walk through that particular aspect on the form later for you as well. But certainly I'm here for the entire session. I'm happy to take some further questions on that later on. Thanks, Blythe.
Thanks, Sarah. I thought it was worth sort of touching on how this concept submission process fits into a bigger picture of how research comes in. And this will be relevant to people submitting concepts, but also I know that there are some researchers, academics who've come into the briefing, so this is relevant to you as well. So let me see if I can get a highlighter going. All right, so the concept submission is over here on the left-hand side. So this is where end users, that's a process where end users, stakeholder partners can request projects are added to our research portfolio. And then we go through a process of prioritising them and having them approved, and it's guided by our biennial research plan, which I will talk a little bit more about in a moment. Once those concepts are approved, we then work with and we then switch into what we call our procurement phase. That's where that kicks off with us working with those stakeholders that submitted the concept to co-design a project brief. So working from just an initial concept to build out a more detailed project brief that will form the basis of what we put out to research providers to explain what we're looking for in this piece of research. Then research will put in expressions of interest to undertake those projects once we've got the brief finalised. Now, as some people here will know from experience, we've got a strong preference to use open calls for expressions of interest for a number of reasons. For it to be as innovative as possible, partly because we follow Commonwealth procurement guidelines and there's a strong preference for open calls for expressions of interest through there. There's some cases where we do go direct or to limited, but they're in very narrow cases. And we have a procurement policy that guides that. You're welcome to send any questions on that to node research managers. But I wanted to flag that because especially for researchers that can create some complexities if you've been involved in talking with stakeholders about a concept. We clearly, on our concept form, we ask people to clearly show that there's no researcher IP in that concept. So, and that is because we then use that as a basis to put a brief together that goes out for an open expression of interest. And so we don't want to have researcher IP put into those EOIs. So that's clear. If you have any questions about that in regard to a specific concept that you're involved with, please send them through to your Node Research Manager. There can be some nuances about that are worth talking about specifically for a particular concept or a particular relationship, if there's researchers involved in talking about project ideas. After that, once we know the research team that we're going to put on to do that project, we're then going to project setup, and a key part of that is co-designing a more detailed project plan. So the whole EOI process is sort of two-part. We get a short expression of interest first. We do that on purpose so that then there is an opportunity for the stakeholders, end users, and the research team to kind of co-design the plan for that project together. Again, with that focus on research that's implementable and translatable and has really strong kind of stakeholder ownership and involvement. And then, of course, we go across to undertaking the project, and there's a collaborative project governance structure set up that involves research team, stakeholders, and the centre as well, with that continuing focus on that translation and implementation throughout. So the concept is really the first initial start of what is a series of steps in setting up a fuller project. So I'm going to go now into a little bit more the detail of the process. And as I said, the concepts are guided, the concept submission process is guided by a biennial research plan. Our current plan, in that plan, we identify key focus areas that we use to prioritise what projects are coming onto the program over the next year or two, and also key capability areas, which are capabilities that we're wanting to build overall through all the projects that are in our program. So in our current biennial research plan, these are the key focus areas, and we will be asking people to put in concepts to tell us which of these focus areas the concept fits into, and then also to explain how their concept fits into one of these. I won't list them. If you have questions about that, again, Node Research Managers are your first point of contact to clarify anything around that. And on the final slide, I've got a link to the biennial research plan. I haven't got the chat open, but if any of the Node Research Managers who I know are here wants to pop up links to things like the biennial research plan in chat so people can open it straight away, please feel free to pop them in. And then finally, for this specific round, we've also identified two key areas. They fit within our key focus areas that we're looking to put new projects on, but are areas where we know there are gaps in our program. We don't have a lot in this area. And they are specifically understanding and mitigating risk of earthquake, cyclone, and severe storm. And that's inclusive of associated hazards like extreme wind, storm surge, etc. And projects that have a strong social equity focus as well. So we're especially keen to have concepts submitted to us that would fall within those two areas. All right, so how we prioritise them, and this is important for people to understand what information to put into the concept. I might start actually with the diagram that's over on the right-hand side. So the process we use is once people submit their project concepts to us on our form, we put a panel together that looks through them and then uses this list of 5 criteria to prioritise those projects, and then makes recommendations about which of them should be prioritised for funding right now. We are in, I guess, what you could think as a good problem is that we're oversubscribed. We have too many concepts submitted to us that we are able to put on the program or have capacity to put on the program at any one time. And that's why we have to go through a prioritisation process, and not all of them get funded. So it's not exactly a competitive process, but we try to have a nice, clear, transparent process for how we prioritise those. Of course, that's not an easy process. We're often comparing apples and oranges. The sector is diverse. There are lots of stakeholders doing different things with different research priorities. So please have some empathy for us in that undertaking, because it is no mean feat. Once we have those recommendations, we send them up to our research and implementation committee, which discusses them and hopefully endorses them or asks for revisions. And then they're sent to our board for approval. Just a note on budget. Because this is a concept and not a full research proposal, we don't have set budgets for projects approved at this stage. We approve just a pocket for a group of projects, and there's a bit more back and forth in negotiation that happens around the size and scope of projects at the next phase when we're putting a brief together, so the budgets aren't locked in. So what we're looking for in the concepts are really these 5 things listed here. So we're looking for concepts that identify a clear critical research need, so a gap in knowledge or practice, and explanation why it's important, why we need to fill that research need. We're looking for evidence that the concept supports the directions that are outlined in our biennial research plan. So that's really about those key focus areas and the key capability areas, and any gap areas we've identified that we're particularly focusing or prioritising to put on the program. The third one is a little bit tricky perhaps for people to do, but I will show you something that will help with it, is how the concept fits within our overall research program. So we look at how it fits in our program, how it can be managed within our resources, and how it provides, and to the extent that it provides value across the centre's participants. I'll show you a little document you can use just to have a skim through what's already on our program, so you can see where your concept would fit within the other projects that we already have on. So that will help you with that part. Of course, being managed within our resources, that's something for us internally to look at, so you will not need to address that. The point about providing value across the centre's participants is really us recognising that everybody who has invested into the centre and is a participant, we want to make sure that our projects, we have a spread of projects that address priorities from all our participants have. So we also look at organisations that we haven't yet got a project on that hits a top priority for them. We'll actually look at that and make sure that participants we have a spread of projects that meet the needs of a range of participants across those that have signed on to the centre. The fourth point there, very important for us, is that the concepts need to show that they're likely to result in outputs that are utilised, so that enhance safety, resilience and sustainability of communities in the context of natural hazards. So that's really about identifying what's going to happen with this research and with these outputs, and who's going to use them and what for, to the extent that that can be known. It's different for each project. And then number 5, as I said, we're a national research centre, so we're wanting to do research that is nationally significant. So we're looking for research projects that are relevant to a range of jurisdictions or sectors and not just single organisations. And you see kind of the weighting we give to each of those criteria indicated there in the brackets, so even weighting pretty much across all of those. So Shiva, I just wanted to check if there's anything else you would like to add to that about the prioritisation process before I move on.
Yeah, hello everybody. Shiva. So no, Blythe, I think we've covered everything. Those are the 5 criteria, and I think we've got the percentages next to each one of them as to how we'll assess. When you actually have a look at the form, you could probably link in directly from the form which areas would capture which assessment criteria for easy linking. So yeah, no, I think you've covered that well. Thanks.
And thanks to the Node research managers that are taking care of the questions in the chat. That's working really well. Thank you. We work well as a team. All right, down to some nitty gritty. So submitting a project concept. We have a form, and I'll show it to you in a moment and give you a chance to ask questions about filling out different boxes in it. And we ask that you submit concept ideas on that form. It really helps us compare and do that prioritisation process, which, like I said, isn't an easy process to go through. So we're really trying to get the information in a form that helps us go through that in a really fair, transparent way. You submit them by email to the research@naturalhazards.com.au email address by the due date, which I will show you in a moment. You'll get a receipt email back to confirm that it's been received. The last of the 4 dot points there is really important. So each concept needs to be endorsed by a senior executive of your organisation. So that's the CEO, commissioner, chief officer, executive director, etc. We know that can take some time. So I just wanted to flag, we don't have extensions for submission by the due date. So please allow some time for endorsement by senior executive. If you're running out of time, that's likely to be the bit that's extending the time or getting it submitted that could make you potentially not hit that submission close date. And we don't have exception to that because we get onto that prioritisation process straight away. We have quite a process we need to fit in right through to approval with our committees, and we don't want it to be delayed, so we start that right away. And just another note there that you can seek assistance and feedback from the centre via your Node Research Manager on any of these, and accessing the form, etc. But I've got some links, as I said, at the end, and you've got links in the chat as well. I'm going to switch over to going through the form. I might give a really brief kind of run through it in case people haven't looked at it yet, and then I'll throw open to questions from people about the form or other parts of the submission process. So I guess the first thing to say is, and there's a couple of people that I know are listening in that this will be relevant to, if you have submitted a concept to us previously in a previous round, you'll need to put it onto this form to resubmit it to us in this round, because the form has changed quite considerably. And there is at least one person on this call that I need to follow up about doing that. So we've changed it, as I said, to try and help make that prioritisation process as clear and as straightforward and as transparent as possible. So on the form, we now ask for some sort of tick boxes about key features to help us understand where it fits. So they're around how it fits with those focus areas in the biennial research plan, the types of hazards it primarily addresses, the type of duration or scope of project you expect it most likely to be. This isn't locked in stone. This is just because at concept stage, you don't know all the full detail of a project brief. So we're just asking for you to tell us what you think is most likely. And in which states and territories it'll most likely be used. We're asking for some explanation or confirmation that stakeholders will be available to help us kind of co-design those project briefs and get the project set up within the next 6 months after they're approved to put on the program, just to make sure that funding isn't held and delayed in putting towards projects over time. And then there's a clear statement there as well. We ask people to confirm that there is no unpublished intellectual property that's owned by researchers or research institutions in the concept. If you're unsure about that, again, reach out to your Node Research Manager. We can help you with that one. Okay, there's a lot of boxes in here, and there are maximum word limits put on them. But rest assured, you do not have to use all the words. You only need to tell us what you feel you need to tell us about your concept. So don't feel that you have to write reams of information. So we asked firstly just for some background behind where the concept came from and who's been involved in developing it, the problem that it's seeking to address. So what's that research need, that knowledge gap, and why is it an important one for research to address? Then a bit of description about the project. So what the project that you're imagining, what it would aim to do, and any description you have of how you see it unfolding. Expected or desired outcomes that you would like the project to achieve. And then we ask you to explain how it supports the direction that's outlined in our biennial research plan in text, as well as the tick boxes. And then there's a box that's around how the concept fits to the centre's overall research program, which is this one. There is a note in there about the biennial research plan. I'm going to show you a document that will be better one for you to use in seeing what's on our current program and how your concept might fit with the projects that we already have. And we're not asking you to read through descriptions of all the projects. We're just asking for a skim or view overall to see what we've got. And if your project is targeting a key gap area, if it's hitting a priority, or it's being utilised by an organisation or a participant that we don't have a strong projects that strongly meet those priorities and they're a priority for your organisation, you can list those in there. And then, of course, we want an explanation of how you see the research outputs being utilised, by who, where, through what kinds of pathways, if they're going to specifically address or create changes in programs, policies, etc. But that's the chance to tell us how you see that being implemented and translated. And again, because we're national and we want to make sure that the work we're doing is relevant nationally, we ask you to specifically tell us how this concept is relevant to multiple stakeholders, jurisdictions and sectors. That's things like why this problem, still solving this problem, is important, and who's going to use it. You can provide letters of support, as someone's asked in the chat, or named stakeholders from organisations who support the research or would be committed to implementing it somewhere in their organisation. Is really good things to have to address that one. And then at the end, this is us gathering the information we need to progress moving forward from concept into brief if it's approved by our board. So any other supporting information you think we should know about this concept, just a statement of any conflicts of interest, a primary contact person for us to follow up with about the concept, other supporting contacts who we will also notify about the concept being the outcome, if it's approved by the board or not, put on our program, and we'll involve all of those stakeholders in developing that project brief for the next stage. And then there's two supporting stakeholder boxes, but the second one is sort of wider supporting stakeholders, organisations, AFAC collaboration groups, etc., that might have endorsed the concept, things like that, that you can put in that aren't named individual people. Then as I said, it needs to be endorsed by somebody in your senior leadership of your organisation. So that is a step through the form. I just wanted to let you know who the key contacts are. We can help and we'll take questions. If you are in Victoria, Tasmania, your point of contact is myself. Queensland and Northern Territory, it's Nicola. WA and South Australia, it will be Brendan. In New South Wales and ACT, it will be Ro. And if you are DCAT and CFA related, George knows your business very well, your research part of your business very well, and is a good key contact there as well. If you're unsure, you can also just contact research@naturalhazards.com.au. That's an actively managed box, and questions there will be steered towards the right place for you. And our contact details are also available there on that link if you'd like to look them up later. I'd encourage people who are thinking about putting into a concept, even just sending us an email to let us know. It's good to know what's coming, and we can link you up. If there's somebody else thinking of a similar kind of concept, we can link you up and connect you, things like that. So it's good to let us know if you're thinking about or preparing a concept to put through. And then there's a few links and resources. Some of them are already up in the chat. There's the page on submitting a project idea that has the concept forms, those key dates. The recording and the slides from this briefing will go up on there. There's a copy of, you can look at that biennial research plan, those key focus areas and capability areas that we're looking to build. The third dot point down there is the document that I think will help in filling out that box about how the concept fits with our research program. So that's an overview of all the projects that we have currently approved in our portfolio and the key research theme areas that they fit within. So that's a good document to scan in thinking about how your concept fits into the overall program. Then we also have a webinar that we've done at an earlier time. It's called A Look Inside Natural Hazards Research Australia, that tells you a bit about how we work and who we are. Any researchers who are interested in finding out more about connecting with the centre, that's a good place to start. But I also wanted to let you know that we are also planning an online briefing targeted to researchers that will be coming. We haven't got a set date for it yet, but we will be doing a briefing that's targeted to researchers who are interested in hearing more about how to engage and connect in the centre. So if you'd like to find out about that, just follow us on social media, or you can sign up to receive our newsletters, and everything is advertised through those beforehand.